Hello, Tim here, and welcome back to another watercolor painting demo, and this time thinking a little bit about composition from a photo. The scene here is a photograph of mine of the River Tamar in the UK on the Devon-Cornwall border, and a smallish sort of harbour wall, quayside, and some boats here, main boat in the water, and a few boats up there on the beach. So this photo of mine, I'm going to make a few adjustments to it, thinking about composition. The photo it's almost there from a composition point of view. It's almost sort of paintable, but I want to make a few changes. First of all, well, my my photo for a start was taken at a slight angle. We can see that the top of the quayside there isn't exactly 100% level, but imagine that a little bit more level. I'm going to bring the harbour wall skyline down a little bit. So it's too close to the top there. There's a lot going on the top. So I want to gradually really move everything down the skyline. So that harbour wall there has got to come right down. Next, over here on the left, that gap there, the end of the harbour wall, just imagine moving the end of the harbour wall, move that slightly over to the right. I think that would look a little bit better, and maybe sneak in a few little distant boats in there on that left-hand side. Over on the left-hand side, that's the other side of the river. That's the sort of Plymouth side of the river. This side is Saltash. So boats on the left there, just a few boats on the left there. Over on the right hand side, this boat here, this big boat, I'm imagining that a little bit smaller, and we're just missing the top right, the actual pointy bit of that boat. So imagine that a little bit smaller, but down in this sort of area here. I think that would look a little bit better. Ignore the figures down there. I don't think that would be too difficult. From a painting point of view, it would be difficult to make them look like figures, a couple of figures there crouching down on the beach. Talking about figures, those figures up there on the quayside, they are right in line with that bunch of figures up there having a sort of impromptu get together. I think they're too much in line with the front of that boat. So that boat there, maybe make it a little bit smaller, but move those figures over to the right, not in the middle, but just, we've got a center line there. Move it just right of that center line. Next, we have, there's a big area here, a massive area of water. What would that be? Maybe a third of the overall composition. So I think try and fill up that area there. The water's quite light there. Bit darker down here. There is a little bit of texture in the water, some things floating on the surface, but I'm imagining that buoy there, move that into that area somewhere down there, just to fill in that space. So that's on the composition side. Then from a painting point of view, this is going to be an exercise in painting boats. Quite simple, actually. The angle of these boats, they're not too difficult. Just trying to get the size right, make them boat-like, make them symmetrical. We've got reflections in the water, lovely reflections. A little bit of movement in the water, not too much though. We've got a graded wash to do here. As I mentioned, we're fairly light at the top part of the water there, but going a little bit darker down here. Thinking about filling in this area here with some darker, softer waves. We've got values to think about. There's lots of lights and darks here. One thing that attracted me to the scene was this light hitting the cabin of the main boat, Marlin, that cabin there, and the contrast of the darkness over to the left, the harbour wall, and the darkness to above it and to the right. That's quite nice from a painting point of view. And then to some extent, we've got the light and dark of these car shadows coming down that beach. I quite like these ropes coming across the scene with the seaweed draping over them. That's quite attractive, and there's some shadows there as well. We've got the texture of the beach to deal with. How do we do that? Bit of splattering maybe, lots of little tiny pebbles and shells, some catching the light. So there's that texture to deal with. And colours as well. Don't let's forget colours. What colour is that beach? What's the colour of the water? The colour of these boats. They are white boats, maybe a little bit weathered, but what kind of colour is that? We zoom into what kind of colours do we see in there? There's a lot going on. Anyway, so let's give it a go. First of all, materials for this one. My normal Saunders Waterford cold press paper, 300 grams, and it's 15 inches by 11 inches. Paints from Mark Jackman in the UK, handmade professional grade paints, and normal palette, neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, spring green, Virgin green, cobalt green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, light red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, lavender, lemon yellow gouache, and white gouache down there. First of all, the drawing. So I discussed the kind of composition ideas I've got for this and the placement of the boat in the water, the people on the quayside, and the boat on the beach. So first thing, get in the top of the quayside. And try and make it level, unlike the photo. And the waterline, and then the little tiny boat with a cabin. The waterline of that boat. So the waterline on the quay side is around about there. Out the other side, and it's sort of the actual water's edge comes around like that. We've got a couple of boats on the beach, and then this larger white boat there, and then that slightly smaller boat behind it. Over on the right hand side we've got a distant boat, some cars and vans up there. Back over the left hand side, the background, which is, that's got to be the other side, the Plymouth side of the river. And then on the top of the quayside, there's some sort of square supports. We can see a little bit more of the right-hand face of those, but then less of them as we come over to the right. Try and make them equally spaced. Right, the people on the quayside sat down, table and chairs. There's 4 figures in the shot. Placement of those. So we've got this main boat here. So the figures in the photo, they're about there, but that would be for me right in the middle, which wouldn't be ideal. So let's have them not equally spaced between that boat and that boat, but maybe around about there. So let's give them a table, and then the actual figures. So one stood up, one sat down, and then let's have another one seated on the right-hand side. Like that. Next, I have to draw in there's cables and ropes across the beach, and they've got some nice angles to them. I'm going to accentuate this angle here, a bit of seaweed, then a large clump of seaweed right on the water's edge. A little bit more detail to that boat. So we've got 3 boats. There is actually a little boat just in there that's quite attractive. Just catching, it's a nice bit of contrast with the light. It's light again. A little tiny boat there, right at the bottom of the harbour wall. I think I'll get that one in as well. It's like a little sort of canoe, I guess, or kayak or something. Yeah, doesn't really bring too much to the composition, but it's in there now anyway. All right, so let's just double check everything. Boat, main boat with the cabin just above the top of the cabin, just above the top of the quayside, and the light hitting the top of that cabin, light hitting the boat on the right, shadows. So the light is coming from the top right corner. We've got shadows going across the beach, going down to the water's edge. There's a few verticals of mast just beyond the quayside. Over on the other side, I'll paint those in as I come to them. I'm not going to draw them in at this stage. There are some buoys floating around. Let's get in a buoy. There's a floating one here. maybe if we make it a round red one just in there, that might be quite a nice balance of that to that, people, figures, and these three boats on the beach. Yeah, I think that's it for the drawing. On to the painting. So I'm going to wet the whole scene first of all, and with a sponge, a fairly even application, a little bit wetter in the lower part of the scene. Fairly even application, but wetter in the lower half, a little bit drier up in the sky. Right, paint first of all the sky. So I'm going to work gradually downwards, and the sky a little bit of a yellow, a creamy yellow in that right hand side where the light's coming from. So that lemon, yellow gouache, little bit of yellow ochre, and then transition to a cerulean blue for the rest of the sky. Then actually bring that down a little bit further. I need to just lift off a little bit my cabin there, where it's just that top of the cabin is just jutting into the sky. Next then, a little bit of burnt umber for the middle ground and this key side. Next, the sea. We'll continue down here, the sea, and that's going to be a slightly darker value than the sky. So going with a bit of cobalt blue. Over the boat, around the buoy, And then as we come into the bottom left-hand corner, we're going to go a little bit warmer because we're just beginning to see the riverbed below, and we're transitioning into this much warmer colour. Put in a little bit of a blue in there. And then a yellow ochre for the beach. A little bit of that lemon gouache. Paint around the boats. Down to the water's edge. A little bit more for the beach. And it's got a bit of coolness in it, so I'm going to pick up some of that cerulean blue, cobalt blue mix, and then a bit warmer, a bit darker. There's a bit of green in it. For the beach, just a little bit higher up there. Mop up the bead accumulating at the bottom. All right, so just to recap, we've got the sky. We've got the underlying wash for the quayside. We've gone over everything, pretty much everything, apart from those areas that are going to be really quite light. And the water, that graded wash from the blue to that warmer colour in the bottom left hand corner, and then the underlying wash for the beach. Now this beach, it does get a little bit lighter right by the water's edge, so I'm just using my very soft sponge just to lift off a little bit of that lighter area. Now in the water down here, there are some very soft little reflections, soft waves, slightly darker colour with some very soft edges. Now I can get those in while the surface is still damp. It's quite wet at the moment, probably just a little bit too wet. But I need to go in with a darker thicker colour. Not too much water. So well and truly mixed. And then with the edge of my brush. Just get in those softer edges. Like that. All right, hairdryer time, just to speed up the process. Next then, the distant shore of the river, paint around the tops of those posts on the quayside, and then the quayside itself, the boats, over on the right hand side we've got again some foliage there, some distant trees and a few cars silhouetted, lots of light on the top of those cars, and then gradually work my way to the foreground, getting in those reflections as well. That's the plan. Right, distant the distant side of the river, and not too green. Should say for this I'm using a Tintoretto brush. This is a 1407 synthetic mop brush. Painting around those posts, down to the top of the quayside. Now there are some boats on the river. Maybe I'll just leave some space for one of those. Down to that end post and down to the water's edge. There we go. That's that distant side of the river on the left hand side, and then over on the right hand side similarly that foliage, ridge in green. Paint around the cars, so the van there, car there. All right, now the quayside, which is quite dark. Actually, it starts light, then it gets a little bit dark. I've got the shade on the left-hand side of those posts, then a little bit of light hits the right-hand side and goes down below the top of the quayside. Leave a little bit of light on top of the quayside. burnt sienna, a little bit of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, maybe a bit of neutral tint, and then start from the left hand side. There's the angle. Down to the water's edge. Post number 2. Number 3. Go all the way down to the water's edge and then up to the back of the main boat, around the top of the rudder, and then up to the cabin of the boat. Go a little bit darker, a little bit darker, up to the back of that cabin, then continue on the right hand side of the cabin, keep going over to the right hand side, go darker towards the bottom of the key, up to that little boat, and then a little bit of a slope up to the right hand side. Try and keep that top of the key level. Now the vehicles in the top right corner there, like it's sort of grey and blues, maybe a little bit of some warmer colours up there, but essentially greys of the metallic paint, or there are some whiter boats. There we go. Just the impression of boat, van, car on that side. Now back to the middle boat, and the top of the hull is blue, and then the hull itself is a warmer colour. So the top is going to be a kind of light blue in a way, and then hull warmer, and then the reflections from the quayside and the boat itself. So in with this blue first of all. And then warmer for the boat. Not too warm, just add a bit of blue to it. There we are, and then the reflections of the quayside and that boat. Right, so something quite dark. Burnt umber, neutral tint. So I'm using the edge of my bot brush here. Not much paint on that brush. And then the reflection of the boat. So there's a bit of a straight edge right by the front of the boat, and then it gets a little bit more wavy. Darker just beyond the boat, where we've got the reflection. Reflection of that harbour wall. Just use my fingertips to connect and merge the paint a little bit more. Now the boats on the beach. So the more distant one has got a dark blue, it's light at the top and then dark blue at sort of like the bottom 2/3, and then the one closer to it's more like a white boat, but it's quite blue, like a very light blue within the boat, and then a bit of a warmer colour on the hull facing us, because I guess it's reflecting the warmth of the sand. Actually, that's too dark for the light bit at the top. And then the white boat, the lighter boat. So a bit of light on the thwart, bit of light on the front of the boat, and then warmer colour on this side of the boat, going up to the pointy end, and then back to the far boat, and that kind of darker colour, the bottom bit of the hull. Nice bit of contrast with the light bit of the boat in front of it. And then the shadow of these two boats. And where we've got that soft edge there, gradual, they're mixing together, the light and the dark. So just let that do its thing. Okay, next, let's get in the people, the party goers on the top of the quayside there. Get them in with a smaller brush. I've got a number 6 here, Cotman, synthetic, so something darkish. Now I need to be careful here not to smudge this, being right-handed, because this is all still quite wet. And I've drawn the figures in, but got to be very careful because they're in the distance. And I got in most of the figures, but not. not all the details. So that's the standing figure, maybe a chair behind, and then the table, seated figure, and another seated figure, there we go, that'll do. Right, next, maybe a little bit of detail to the boat. On that left-hand side. Just the impression of a couple of boats on that left-hand side. The buoy, which I'm going to put dangling just to the left and closer to us, just to the left of that main boat. A sort of pinkish colour. And now I think it's time for a little bit of detail work with the, well, details have to be applied to the top of the quayside, just a few more bits and pieces there. The boats, the seaweed, the ropes, maybe try and get a little bit of texture into this beach as well. First of all, then, the seaweed coming across, and it's a bit of a mixture of greens and purples, dark purples, and we've got it coming in at an angle. So neutral tint, a little bit of Allerton crimson, a little bit of viridian green. Connect with the reflections. A few little reflections just to give a sense of movement, and then up to the shoreline and bigger clump there. Now, just along the shoreline, there's some little brighter layers of green. And some more seaweed just dangling from a rope. Couple of dangling pieces, and the shadow of those as well. Maybe something coming in from that right hand side. There's the shadow of that seaweed there. Now, a little bit of texture to this beach. I could do some splattering, but I'm just going to put in a few little marks like this. Where these little pebbles are under the water, they're a softer edge. I could have gone a little bit, could have painted onto a damp surface there, but I'm just putting in those marks and then just rub them out with my fingertips. Some chains with seaweed on them dangling from these boats. So there's some kind of boat over that way where the ropes are going to. Maybe some masts just beyond the quayside here. Bit more detail to some of the cars up on the quayside. Little car park up there. Back down to the boat and some windows on the boat. Actually, my cabin is a little bit shorter than the one in the photo. That's all right. Couple of front windows and the all-important line at the top of the hull, and then The waterline is darker. Some darker reflections. Little bit of a reflection for the boy there. Few more details to the boats on this side. I just think I need a bit more softer reflections in this foreground. I need to be very careful here. I need to go very weak with this. It's a little bit too light at the moment. It dried quite a lot lighter. So just a very weak, we're glazing over the top. Just a few little darker lines by the water's edge. Soften up the little bit of that lighter blue below the chains. Maybe some thinner lines in the distance, a few more masts and things. There we go. Bit more detail, that distant boat. Right, just going to dry things up and then rub out the pencil lines. All right, clean rubber. Just rub out some of these pencil lines, get a fresher edge back to these lighter areas. That boat down there as well. And a little bit of where there's some ropes and rigging just lighting up against a darker background. Get in some of those with a rigger brush. Bit of white paint. Got to make sure my brush is well and truly clean. So fresh out the tube. Not too thick, not too thin. Oops, that's too thick. Or the line is too thick, doesn't matter. There's a mast over here. A few masts in the boats down there. A few little speckles of light on the seaweed. Bit of light on that buoy. A few little lighter bits on the beach here, particularly up against the darker marks I made. There we go. And as I sometimes do at the end of my painting session, just a little bit of a self-critique, see how things went, things that went sort of all right, maybe things that didn't go as planned. Just to recap, exercising composition from a photo, a few changes that I made. I think the sky, the amount of sky I've got just right to get in the balance of the figures, the position of the figures there, moving them just slightly to the right of where the boat is. So quite happy with the composition from the point of view of the skyline there and the horizon. managed to sneak in a few boats on the left-hand side going down the river. The main boat there, yes, I think that's sort of placed okay. And then that large white boat sort of leaning on its side, making that smaller, moving it down the beach. Yes, that sort of turned out okay. Keep the background nice and simple. Moving the buoy over there to try and fill in this massive gap of water. Could have put a bit more texture on the beach. So if you do this yourself, please have a go. Let me know in comments how you got on, or indeed if you're on Patreon. Those Patreon people will know that you can share your effort in the gallery, and we can all have a little look at that and put in our own comments. But I think the texture could have done maybe a little bit of splattering and try and get into some different colors. Well, it's kind of fairly, the color of the sand is one color, one value. It could have been a little bit lighter still on the near down towards the waterline, a little bit darker in this kind of that kind of middle area there, a little bit darker, but yeah, a bit more texture. Could have paid a bit more attention to the seaweed, to maybe a few more dry brush marks, and make it a little bit more solid as well. The water, this big expanse of water here, it's all right. I think on reflection, with the benefit of hindsight, that could have been better if as a second application, trying to get it darker. My first stage process of painting that water, it was a little bit too light in that bottom left-hand corner. When it was dry, I could have laid down some clear water here, the board, the painting on a slight slope, then as I come down, gradually go in, glazing, so a weak wash, and gradually go darker into that bottom left-hand corner. And again, adding in those soft reflections as well at the end. Just trying to get the timing right when the water surface is it's still quite damp, not too moist, not too dry, but just in the middle to get those soft edges. I think I've got some fairly hard edges there, and I smoothed it out with my fingers, and it sort of worked, but it would have been better, I think, with that second phase, that clear water, and then going a little bit darker with a weak wash down there. Anyway, hope you liked the whole demo and an exercise in composition photo. I'll catch up with you on the next demo. Bye-bye.